Hello everyone. Hello, surprise. Third baby fishy video in one day. Because I have just learnt about the existence of another language-based guessing game, which as you can tell from the entirety of the content on my channel, I really enjoy. This is called Gramle, and I'll put a link to this game in the description, but I think this is going to be a great opportunity, and this is my first time seeing or playing this game ever, as opposed to Lingual and Langle, which I've been playing for a good long while, on and off. This is going to give us a nice window into phonetics, which is something that you don't really get to see a lot of, unless you're doing linguistics, right? So let me sort of explain what we have got on the screen, what you are looking at here. And what you've got at the top of the screen, this is a spectrogram, a spectrogram of a word being spoken by a male speaker of English with a North American accent. The top graph here that's labeled amplitude, that's a rough sort of proxy for volume. And so you can get a rough idea of how loud and quiet the word is at each point. You've got sort of a lower intensity at the start, which probably corresponds to a consonant. Then it broadens out. We get much higher amplitude here in the middle, this bit here. And this is most likely a vowel. It's also got nice sort of repeating waveform, which means it's probably just a pretty clear open throat, like a you've got a nice sort of sine wave going on here. And then we've got a much quieter bit here, which is probably some sort of stop consonant, a voiceless one, because it's got a much noisier signal and it is much quieter. So we are looking at something here that's some sort of probably a voiced consonant, then a vowel, then a voiceless consonant. Now I am going to keep drawing on the screen here to highlight the things that I'm talking about. But as we look at this, you can see pretty distinctive dark bars passing through the section that I think is a vowel, right? You've got one that goes like this, and then you've got, and they blend together a bit at the end, but 2 and 3. These are what's called formants. And so when you speak, your throat, your mouth, everything forms like a resonator. The most sort of like canonical example of a resonator is a vibrating string, but because of the structure of the vocal tract, it's actually like a tube. And in fact, a very sort of basic way that you can model vowels is by thinking of the throat, the larynx, the vocal tract as being sort of 3 tubes. A short one here, medium length one here, and then a nice big long one that runs right down into the lungs. Now the longer the tube, as you may know if you've seen a trombone being played, or if you know what a trumpet versus a tuba sounds like, the longer the tube, the deeper the vibration is going to be. And that corresponds to a lower pitch sound. And so typically what you will get here is the fundamental frequency, which is usually labeled as F0. That's the deepest one, and that corresponds to the bottom line there on the graph. And that's more or less just the pitch of your voice. That'll sit higher if you have a higher pitch voice, that'll sit lower if you have a lower pitch voice. And then they're labeled after that in ascending order. So you get F1, F2, sometimes F3. It's a little harder to see on this, but you could probably make a case for F3 to be something like here. Now the interesting thing here is, apart from the fundamental frequency, which is just the pitch of your voice, these other formants are affected by the shape of the different sections of your higher vocal tract. So the length from sort of here to here is affected maybe by how open your jaw is, how raised or lowered your larynx is, that sort of thing, and you're going to get different pitches there. Because when we speak, we don't generate a pure sine wave, right? We don't generate just one pure frequency, then we would all sound like a really old modular synthesizer, right? There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's friction, there's all sorts of stuff. We're messy, wet, organic systems. But what you will get is, if you're familiar with the concept of resonance, I'm just kind of remembering and trying to think how best to phrase this. If you're familiar with the concept of resonance, right, resonant frequencies, that's the sort of thing that when you wet your finger and run it around the top of a crystal glass, you're causing vibrations, and the resonant frequency of the glass itself is going to pick out a pitch. And as you put more water into the glass, that dampens some of the vibrations, and so the pitch becomes higher. Less water in the glass, there's more to vibrate, the pitch becomes lower. It's also whenever you see, a famous opera singer shattering a glass with her voice, that is because she is reaching the sort of resonant frequency of that glass with the note that she sings, usually she. And this causes like a sympathetic vibration in the glass, right? And if you manage to hold that pitch really steady, these sympathetic vibrations do what's called constructive interference. The waves overlap, and much like when two waves overlap in the ocean at the beach, they add together and they make much bigger waves. And so because you have these overlaying waves, and then the sympathetic vibration of the glass adds more, and then the incoming energy of the vibrations of the air molecules from the note being sung adds more, the vibration continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger until it's bigger than the tensile strength of the glass, and the glass shatters. What does any of this have to do with the picture on the screen? So, your vocal tract also has resonant frequencies, and you can control those resonant frequencies by moving the different parts of your vocal apparatus, by moving your tongue, moving your jaw, opening your mouth wider or narrower, squashing your lips together, pushing them out, spreading them wide. And what this does is it changes which frequencies are going to be picked out, because you're generating just a whole range of frequencies with your voice, and they tend to be in multiples of the fundamental frequency. Those are the most sort of likely to show up. But as you change the shape of these other resonators in your throat, you're going to shift where those are. And so one exercise that you often do in an intro phonetics class is you record yourself saying a bunch of different words. In my case, it was a bunch of words with the frame HD. So it was like had, hid, heard, hod, who'd, hide. Mainly chosen because there's a lot of different vowels you can stick in there and still get valid words. But also because the consonants on either side don't give you as much, they don't interfere with the vowel as much, and so you get a nice sort of clear picture. What you then do is you put that recording into a phonetic analysis program such as Praat. You can probably do it with Audacity too. I haven't really tried, but Praat is the one that I know. It has a function that lets you generate a spectrogram like this, and then you look at these dark lines, and you pick out a spot or a couple of spots and take the average from one part of the word where it's pretty stable. So you might, in this case, pick out, say, let's get something contrasting like green. You might decide to take a slice here, right? And if you do so, Praat will give you a numeric sort of value for each of these formants at that point in time. You plug that into Excel, and you plot F1 versus F2 minus F1. You make a little plot of that, and that's going to give you a point on a vowel trapezium. Now we're going to clear off the screen here. Let me just do this and then this to bring it back. Vowel trapezium we've talked about before, right? And so more or less, F1 can be used as a proxy for how far forward or back in the mouth, and there is a reason this is a trapezium, right? This shows you roughly the positions that your tongue and your mouth can reach when you're making a vowel. So if your jaw is all the way open, your tongue can't quite get as far forward because of the way the jaw hinges. Pulls things back a little bit as you open it wider. And so as your jaw is more open, your tongue naturally is going to come further back. As your jaw is more closed, you get more range. When you're up here, you can go E all the way back to U. When you're down here, you can go ah, but you can't go like, you gotta stick it, it doesn't work. No languages do this. So, but all of that to say, roughly the forward versus back corresponds to your F1, and the up and down corresponds to F2 minus F1. There's other things that you can do as well. If you've got a clear signal for F3, that can be used as a way to gauge lip rounding or R coloring. There's lots of different sort of higher order effects, if you like, that you can capture using that format. But that gives you your sort of canonical vowels, right? And so you've got E up here, you've got U back here, you've got O back here, you've got R here, and then A squeezes like somewhere in here. Let's clear all this off the screen. So looking at this, we've got our formats here, and what we can see is if we were to take a guess at, say, this vowel here, all right, it's got a pretty big value for F2, it's got a pretty small value for F1. So F1 being small corresponds to a lower frequency, which is a deeper pitch, which means a longer resonating cavity. So that means that this is probably somewhere fairly far forward in the mouth, because we're stretching this resonator out by pushing our tongue forward, giving more room for the standing wave to kind of be generated. So we're looking at something that's in the front half of the vowel trapezium, trapezoid if you like. Now F2 minus F1, we can see up here, F2 sitting somewhere around 3,000, F1 sitting somewhere around 1,000. So we got a big F2, we got a small F1. Big number minus small number gives you big number. Big number corresponds to higher pitch, which corresponds to smaller resonator. And this being the vowel height means the height of your jaw, because we're looking at sort of this direction of resonance, I suppose. And so a bigger value for F2 minus F1 is going to correspond to a higher vowel, if I'm remembering my phonetics properly, and it has been, God, like 11 or 12 years, over a decade, since I took an intro phonetics class, and then I didn't do a whole lot of phonetic analysis after that. I got deep into syntax, morphology, historical linguistics, and didn't do a lot of this sort of, which I kind of regret, because I love this stuff. I used to sometimes just sit around at home and record myself saying different vowels and plug it in and be like, hey, look, I made my own vowel chart. Isn't that fun? Because that's the sort of person that I am. So, okay, so let's pull back up our vowel trapezium. I'm drawing it differently each time. I don't like it. Let's go. And so we are thinking that we are pretty far forward in terms of our front and back, and we're pretty high in terms of our high versus low. And so we are probably looking at something that is in this sort of area, excuse me, of the trapezium. So that could be an E, could be an E. We don't really have an I like there. I don't think it's going to be a schwa, but yeah, maybe. It's kind of borderline. And so that tells us that this is probably like an E or an E, this bit here, right? Now, looking at this other vowel here, we can see it starts very, very close together, but still fairly noisy. So this is some sort of sonorant consonant. This could be a voiced stop, like your D, your G. It could be an approximant, a Y or a L. Those are also pretty resonant sounds, and so you get this sort of clear banding, as opposed to somewhere over here. There's not really, in this section over here, any sort of formants to speak of, and there's no clear sort of repeating pattern of vibrations. It's pretty noisy, and that tends to be either a voiceless stop, or when you have a nice widespread thing like this, it could be a S or a Ch or something of that sort of ilk. Given how quiet it is, looking at the intensity up there, I'm kind of more inclined to think, well, actually, no, I was going to say a stop, but I would imagine that a stop would take less time than that. It's very short. I mean, we're talking on the scale of tenths of a second here, but this is spread out almost over a whole tenth of a second, which is probably longer than I would expect a stop to last for. Okay. And And finally, if we clear that out again, we have this vowel here. This vowel, and our analysis of this vowel is maybe made slightly trickier by the fact that this is a diphthong. This is a vowel going straight into another vowel. There's nothing breaking them up here in the middle here. And so it starts here, but your tongue, your mouth, moves in anticipation of the target, the end of the diphthong, right? So you don't just go E and then smash cut to E in the diphthong ear. You don't just go A, smash cut to E in I. There's movement. It's, you know, it's a gesture. So there is a bit of a transition where you'll see that you drift from the target of that pure initial vowel in the diphthong being two vowels in sequence like that, and you move towards the target. Now, bearing that in mind, I might choose a slice somewhere closer to the beginning of this, like somewhere here. You could go for the middle. The middle is usually a good spot because it's where it's most stable. It's where you're the most sort of like in the vowel. So I would go early middle here. So getting rid of that, and we have a look at where these formants are there. And so we have got F1, still quite low, so it's quite forward in the mouth. And it is thus like an R or an E or something like that. F2 minus F1, well, previously our F2 value was sitting up here at 3000. Here it's sitting up more like 2200, I want to say. Yeah, at least near the start. But by the end it's at about 25. So somewhere in the range of 22 to 2500 hertz. Now, about 2200 minus about 1000 is going to give you about 1200, and that's significantly lower than the 2000 that we had from our previous vowel, right? And so, for maybe the final time this video, vowel trapezoid, vowel trapezium, vowel space. Yeah, it's fine. This should be more slanted, but it's fine. We're still pretty far forward. Over green, we're still pretty far forward. But we're not as high. We are maybe more like this. We could even be down here, right? And so that has us looking at vowels like E or A. And so knowing that this is probably an E or it could be an E, if we're assuming that this is an E, then this has to be an E, and we have A. If we assume that this is an A, we could have I, but there's no I. That's not a diphthong in English. And so I think it's most likely that our target vowel here is an E. It's a closing diphthong. I don't believe any diphthongs in English end with E. They're either fully closing or fully opening diphthongs, and they're either front or back. You don't get many that cross except for oi, which starts back low and ends front high. So we are thinking that we have got a word that has got A in the middle of it. Let's just jot that down over here. So this is probably A. This A, this is the vowel in neighbor, way, date. Okay, and so we are thinking that we have got a voiced consonant, or maybe a nasal or an approximant at the start. And so let's try and think about what could go there. Nape, that is a word. I have a feeling that it's going to be an S at the end. And that raises an interesting possibility here, because being a speaker of American English, they may well say vase. That doesn't quite work though, because we are expecting five symbols here. So what could we have then? Trace? Maybe? I'm pretty locked in on this being, because like Aif, Aish, Crash. I don't see a great, well, okay. Here's another thing to know about phonetic analysis, right? When you see F1 and F2 making that sort of shape where they pinch in together, this is what's known as a velar pinch. And normally you would see it in the other direction. So normally you would see this. And that is a good way to know that you've got a vowel followed by a velar consonant. You can kind of see it happening here, but I don't know if it's completely the case. But it could be like eggs. Eggs. You know, there are possibilities. Velar consonants are pronounced with your tongue raised to your soft palate at the back of your mouth. So they are your g, your k, ng, like sing. That's velar nasal. So okay. And in that case, since we've got resonance here, I would expect this to be voiced. So if I'm thinking voiced nasal, that's gay, gace, case, doesn't give us enough. We could have an R in there, it could be grace. And that's, you know, I'm not mad about that, yes. And we'll get some information because this works like Wordle. So let's go ahead and plug in grace. That's not enough syllables still. Not enough symbols still. So we actually need grapes. Ah, potentially, because look, we have this dead spot here where we're not getting really anything at all. And this would be consistent with a voiceless stop, right? Grapes. So, because nothing, wherever a stop is by definition nothing coming out. So there's no sound, no vibration, nothing on the spectrogram. Okay, so actually in that case, let us try grapes. And nearly everything is wrong. Okay. So maybe then the vowel is lower than we thought and it's an I. The R is in the right place. No, the R is correct but in the wrong place. So that means, well, I don't think it's going to be I, and it's also not an S at the end. IRF. Okay, this is throwing a real spanner in the works. I mean, it's not going to be an R followed by a velar. There's no word that goes erg, erk, erng. They aren't a thing. And if it's not a G at the start, Maya? No. Sh could be sh at the end. Mirage, why? There. Z. J. Mirage? M. Aj? How are we looking? So the R's still in the wrong place. Maybe I'm going about this all wrong. Okay, so let's assume then that the R is first. Ims, rhyme, writes, R-I-T-S, no. Writing? I think that should be an E. Where's E? Writing? Ah, no, it needs an M. And it's not a diphthong there. And it's not an R. R. So maybe that's a schwa. We've got the R in the right place. R. We've already... Ra. Re. Ra. Ravage? So let me run you through my logic at this point, because I'm just thinking and frowning. My logic at this point is these formant lines, these bottom formant lines here, get a lot darker at the beginning and middle than they are in this second sound, right? And something that this is getting a bit dicier in my memory, but sonorant consonants like nasals or approximants like r, y, they show a darker band along the bottom of the spectrograph like this. And I can't remember the reasoning behind that. That's just the effect that it has on the sounds. And if we use that logic, right, we got r, then a vowel, then we got some other nasal or sonorant, which I'm going to guess is an M, because that's the only other nasal we got. So that would give us, but that ah isn't right for that. Ram, no. So that wouldn't be an ah. First formant stays low, so we're not doing a diphthong that crosses front to back, right? We're staying forward. Oh, row, that moves back a bit. But we're running out of diphthongs, really. Unless it just is a pure vowel, in which case it could be like rami, rami, ra, r. I guess in that case it's most likely to be re, m, remis. No, because we need an e somewhere. If that's an then we lose the e. Oh. My headphones just stopped recording? Hopefully that didn't kill the sound. I've been doing this for such a long time that my headphones disconnected. They got no signal. There's this dark vertical band between the two vowels, and that makes me think there is a consonant there. But there are precious few consonants that could go directly before an M, and we need an M in there. Which makes me think it's rem. And then we've got this stop. And there's not many stops that can go there, right? Like remb, remd, remd, remk, rems, remsh, remb, remd. That'll become rent. Remd, remk, remth. None of those feel right. I'm going to go way out into left field here and just throw in remote. Ah. Oh. Yeah, I guess this formant does come up a little bit at the end. That's interesting. I need to... Like I said, it's been about 12 years. But that's not an eh, because that would be remote. It's not that. And it's not a schwa, according to this transcription. It's not going to be ramote, remote, remote. So it must be the here, which is like a stressed schwa, remote. And I guess that makes sense. So let's go ahead and plug that in, and this should be correct. It is not correct. You pronounce that with an E? Remote? It's going to let me listen, so...
Remote. Remote. Remote.
That's not an E. I was warned when I looked at the about and the rules for this game that sometimes the transcription is not what you would expect, just based on the sounds that you hear or see on the spectrograph, because it is taken from a dictionary transcription that was then converted to IPA. So this could just be one of those cases, and I'm not mad about it. And you know what? If I had been paying attention... Oh, I'm dumb. What vowel could go here? Is it the only vowel that I've got that has, it is in the word, but I haven't put it in the right position yet? Nah, couldn't be. There's just no way. So that's on me entirely. If I had been paying a little more attention, I would have had that one 2 turns ago. But there we go. That's a little insight into phonetics and how tricky it can be to look at a spectrograph and try and figure out what's being said from it. Alright, so this is a very long video at this point. I may or may not continue playing these daily. If they continue taking this long, it's probably not something I'm going to fit into my daily schedule. I have a job and so forth. But, you know, if there's a quicker one, if there's one that I get a bit more easily, or if I brush up on my phonetics and I get the hang of this a bit better, we may do this again in future. Anyway, I hope you're having a good one, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.